Today is my daughter Claire's wedding day. I arrived at the venue, feeling excited, only to realize that my husband Jacob and his mother Margaret were nowhere to be found. There was less than an hour left before the ceremony. I started to worry, wondering if they had been held up somewhere. Instinctively, I called Jacob, but he didn't answer. Did something happen? I decided to call Margaret next. This wasn't the time to dwell on whether I liked her or not. But she didn't answer either. At that point, I was sure something was wrong. Ryan's relatives gradually gathered their things and made their way out of the waiting room together. I figured this was my last chance, so I called Jacob one more time. The phone rang and rang for what felt like forever, but finally he picked up. "Where are you? The ceremony is about to start." I raised my voice the moment he answered, but what I heard next was a smug, almost amused tone that I couldn't imagine coming from his usual self.
"Sorry, I'm in Spain right now. Today's mom's birthday, remember? We took a little trip to celebrate. Oh, and I borrowed your car, so you'll need to cover the expenses."
Jacob and Margaret had ditched Claire's wedding to go to Spain. What could possibly be more important than Claire's wedding? How could you do this? My emotions took over, and I found myself shouting into my phone, not caring who saw me.
Think about mom's age. This might be her last chance to travel abroad. Honestly, even a domestic trip might be pushing it. I didn't have a choice.
His attempt to justify himself made me angrier than I had ever been before. Whether Margaret had pressured him into it or not didn't matter anymore. Then go ahead and enjoy Spain forever. My name is Emma.
All right then, Emma. I'm heading out first.
Okay, take care. I'll be leaving soon too. The front door shut with a thud as I saw my husband, Jacob, off. It was another typical morning in our house, the usual start to the day for our family of 3. Pretty soon, it would be time for our daughter, Claire, to head out as well. I wrapped up Claire's lunch and placed it neatly in a small tote bag.
All right, all set.
Here you go, your lunch.
Thanks, all right, I'm off.
Be careful. Have a good day.
You too, Mom. See you later.
And then, I was the only one left at home. Compared to the two of them, my work starts a little later. I use that extra time to take care of some housework before heading out. That's my daily routine. Making lunch is part of that routine too. Once I finished up my morning chores, it was about time for me to leave as well. The moment my eyes landed on the calendar, I felt a wave of dread wash over me. I suddenly remembered that in just 1 week, Jacob's mother, Margaret, would be coming to visit. A sigh escaped my lips before I even realized it. To put it bluntly, my relationship with Margaret is downright terrible. It's not that I dislike her unilaterally. she's the one who dislikes me. The biggest reason? The fact that I didn't give birth to a son. Margaret desperately wanted a grandson to continue the family line, but the only child born was our daughter, Claire. She never got over it, and even now, more than 20 years after Claire was born, she still finds ways to bring it up whenever she can. Of course, with an attitude like that, she was never particularly kind to Claire either. Another frustrating thing is that Jacob still hasn't fully separated from his mother, and Margaret hasn't let go of him either, which is why she keeps visiting our home so often. Jacob is usually kind and easy to talk to, but when it comes to his mother, he treats her words as absolute. During those times, he refuses to compromise and even becomes cold toward Claire. Remembering that Margaret would be here soon was enough to put me in a gloomy mood first thing in the morning. I could already predict how she'd find new ways to make my life miserable. Letting out another heavy sigh, I grabbed my things and left the house. That night, however, as I was making dinner, an unexpected piece of good news came my way.
Mom, I need to talk to you.
What is it? You sound serious.
Actually, I'm getting married.
I knew she'd been seeing someone for a while, and I had met him before, but I never expected it to lead to marriage. Overwhelmed with joy, I stopped preparing dinner and wrapped Claire in a tight hug. Thinking that Claire was finally starting her own independent life filled me with a mix of emotions: pride, happiness, and a tinge of sadness all at once. But there was one thing I felt completely relieved about. She would finally be free from Margaret's influence. Remembering this morning's thoughts only made that feeling even stronger. Congratulations! That's amazing news!
Thanks, Mom.
Are you having a wedding?
Yeah, since he's Catholic, we're planning to have it at a church.
Oh, I see. A million questions started running through my head. When's the date? I need to request time off right away.
Mom, slow down. We haven't decided on that yet.
Oh, yeah, you're right. I just got a little carried away.
That's not like you, Mom.
Maybe not, but that's how happy I am. Let me know as soon as you set the date, okay?
Of course, I will.
And just like that, I had something new to look forward to in my life. Time passed, and finally, the wedding was just a day away. Because of work, Jacob would be heading straight to the venue from his business trip in Boston. It was my first sleepless night alone in decades. Everything should have been perfectly prepared, yet I kept worrying. Did I pack that? What if something was missing? All these little concerns kept piling up in my mind. More than anything, I was just too excited to sleep. I wouldn't get to see a flashy wedding gown, but knowing I'd get to admire a modest yet elegant and beautiful dress was more than enough to keep my excitement high. Alone in the dimly lit room, I found myself grinning as I imagined the big day. Then the big day arrived. I put on my finest dress, the one I had inherited from my mother, and stepped out of the house with excitement and confidence. Just as Claire had mentioned before, I had arrived too early. When I got to the venue, only the staff, busy with preparations, were there, and neither Jacob nor Margaret had arrived yet. The groom's family hadn't arrived yet either. I figured this was a good opportunity to see Claire, so I decided to give her a call. "Good morning, Claire.
Good morning. What's up?
I got here way too early, so I thought I'd come see you."
I told you you're always too early.
She laughed, then told me where she was.
Claire, you look beautiful.
"Why did you choose this dress?"
Isn't it elegant? I did want to wear a flashy, more revealing wedding dress, but I thought this modest and beautiful one was lovely too.
"Yeah, it really is." When Jacob and I got married, we had a traditional ceremony. I wore a wedding dress. We stood before a minister to exchange vows, and then we cut into a big wedding cake together. That was a wonderful memory too, but a Catholic wedding was an entirely different experience. I had attended many weddings before, but this was something new for me as well. So, let me ask you again, what is it about Claire that made you fall for her?
Come on. That's kind of embarrassing.
Claire, her partner Ryan, and I sat together, casually talking about all sorts of little things. Before I knew it, quite a bit of time had passed, and I started noticing Ryan's relatives arriving one by one. It was about time to head to the waiting room and greet his family. "All right, I should get going. Sorry for barging in."
No, it's fine. See you later.
With that, I made my way back to the family waiting area. This time, the room was filled with people. Since I was already familiar with most of them, we exchanged casual greetings and chatted about how I had already met the bride and groom. That's when I realized that Jacob and Margaret were still nowhere to be seen. There was less than an hour left before the ceremony. I started to worry, wondering if they had been held up somewhere. Instinctively, I called Jacob, but he didn't answer. Did something happen? I decided to call Margaret next. This wasn't the time to dwell on whether I liked her or not. But she didn't answer either. At that point, I was sure something was wrong. Those two were inseparable. If they were both missing, there had to be a reason. While I was caught up in all these thoughts, the staff came in and instructed the relatives to start heading to the venue. Ryan's family gathered their things and slowly made their way out of the waiting room. I followed along, but then stepped outside. I figured this was my last chance, so I called Jacob one more time. The phone rang and rang for what felt like forever, but finally, he picked up. "Where are you? The ceremony is about to start." I raised my voice the moment he answered, but what I heard next was a smug, almost amused tone that I couldn't imagine coming from his usual self.
Sorry, I'm in Spain right now. Today's Mom's birthday, remember? We took a little trip to celebrate. Oh, and I borrowed your car, so you'll need to cover the expenses.
Jacob and Margaret had ditched Claire's wedding to go to Spain. And on top of that, they were using my credit card. Panicked, I opened my handbag and checked my wallet. Sure enough, one of my cards was missing. I was so stunned, I couldn't even speak.
Didn't I tell you? Mom won a trip to Spain in a raffle.
And what difference does that make? If I had known the timing, I would have shut that idea down immediately. That's why Jacob didn't tell me. What could possibly be more important than Claire's wedding? How could you do this? My emotions took over, and I found myself shouting into my phone, not caring who saw me.
Think about Mom's age. This might be her last chance to travel abroad. Honestly, even a domestic trip might be pushing it. I didn't have a choice.
His attempt to justify himself made me angrier than I had ever been before. Whether Margaret had pressured him into it or not didn't matter anymore. Did you just say my card?
Yeah,
Then go ahead and enjoy Spain forever. With that, I hung up and immediately called another number. My goal, of course, was to cancel the card. I hurried back to the venue and quickly fed Ryan's relatives a lie. I'm so sorry, but it seems Jacob and Margaret got stuck on the highway.
Oh dear, that sounds awful.
No one would ever guess they were actually in Spain. I hated that I had to make up such a ridiculous lie, but dwelling on it would only make me angrier, so I let it go. This wasn't something Claire needed to know right now. For better or worse, her wedding wasn't just a casual event. It was a sacred and solemn ceremony with no flashy moments or even a kiss at the altar. I wanted her to focus entirely on the beauty of the ceremony itself. With or without Jacob and Margaret, the wedding proceeded smoothly, and before I knew it, the ceremony was coming to an end. I figured it was about time to turn my phone back on, and the moment I did, I saw an overwhelming number of missed calls. As expected, they were all from Jacob. I sighed, completely unsurprised. The most recent call had been just 2 minutes ago. I knew it was only a matter of time before he called again, and sure enough, my phone rang almost immediately. Not wanting anyone to overhear such an embarrassing conversation, I stepped outside the venue before answering. What do you want?
what do I want? You canceled the car, didn't you?
I sure did. It's my card after all. I can do whatever I want with it.
I almost got arrested because of that.
That's not my problem. Besides, taking my card without permission is theft.
You've got to be kidding me.
No, You have got to be kidding me. Skipping Claire's wedding? Have you lost your mind? She's your daughter. Then I heard a furious voice yelling on the other end of the line.
Give me the phone.
Suddenly, the shouting was right in my ear.
Do you even care if we starve to death?
I already told Jacob. It's my card, so I can do whatever I want with it.
You couldn't even give birth to a son. You should be dedicating yourself to me since I had one.
That was so absurd. It barely registered as words. The moment she said it, I regretted picking up the call at all.
We still had 3 days left. Without the card, how are we supposed to buy souvenirs, let alone eat?
And what does that have to do with me? Anyway, the ceremony is still going on, so I'm hanging up now. With that, I ended the call without giving them a chance to argue. 3 days after the wedding, as I was getting ready for work in the morning, the doorbell rang. Who could it be this early? I checked the monitor, and there stood Jacob. To my surprise, he had brought Margaret with him. At first, I considered just ignoring them, but I had to leave for work, and more importantly, I didn't want to cause a disturbance for the neighbors. So, reluctantly, I answered. The moment they stepped inside, they immediately started yelling and making a scene.
Hey, do you have any idea what you've done? We went through hell because of you.
What on earth are you thinking? Thanks to you, I had the worst birthday ever.
You think I'm going to forgive you for this?
That's exactly what I should be saying. How could you possibly think a trip with Margaret was more important than Claire's wedding? I was too exhausted to even raise my voice. Instead, I responded in a calm but firm tone.
How am I supposed to love Claire when she can't even carry on the family name? I don't care what happens to her.
Margaret, as always, spouted complete nonsense, as if she were in the right. She probably genuinely believed she was. Otherwise, there's no way she could say something so outrageous with such confidence. Either way, the one who suffered the most was Claire. It's bad enough that Margaret wasn't there, but even her own father didn't bother to see her in her wedding dress.
This is ridiculous. I couldn't even bring back souvenirs. That completely ruined my deal at work.
After ruining Claire's wedding, he still had the audacity to complain. In reality, it wasn't that big of an issue, but there was no need to mention that now. That deal won't be a problem.
What do you mean?
Jacob still wasn't done venting his anger and kept raising his voice for no reason. At this point, I couldn't even feel sorry for him anymore. Anyway, I have to get to work. You should come by later. We need to talk. Jacob must have sensed something because his face suddenly turned pale and he fell silent. Margaret, on the other hand, looked confused about what was going on and kept shrieking. I left the house a little later than usual, listening to her voice fade behind me.
Good morning, boss.
I've told you 100 times. Stop calling me that.
But it's the truth. Oh, Jacob isn't here yet.
Don't worry. He'll probably show up late again. Just send him to my office when he arrives.
Got it.
That's right. This is my company. Jacob works at the business I built. I walked into my office and set my things down. On my desk sat a completed divorce agreement. I had prepared it right after the disaster at the wedding. This wasn't just about expressing my intention to get a divorce. I also planned to fire Jacob from the company. As for the reason, he had probably figured it out from our conversation this morning. His work ethic had never been great. He was constantly late, frequently absent without notice, and I had to apologize to employees time and time again. I had always covered for him. Not just because he was my husband, but because, at home, he had been a kind and decent father. But now, that illusion had completely shattered. There was no longer any reason to protect him. As a company, I had no need for an employee like that. So today, I was going to make it official. After waiting for a while, I heard loud, hurried footsteps, and Jacob came rushing in. And just as expected, Margaret was right behind him. I let out a deep sigh without thinking. Why did you bring her here?
What do you mean, why? I still have plenty to say. And what's with this CEO's office? What kind of childish game are you playing?
Unlike Margaret, who was still fuming with anger, Jacob had completely gone pale.
So, what did you want to talk about?
Even his tone had changed. He had finally realized the position he was in, but it was far too late. And apparently, Margaret had no idea about my role in the company. Now, she was ranting about that. I truly thought, deep down, that she was an unbearably noisy and exhausting person. You mean Jacob never told you anything?
Told me what?
That I'm the CEO of the company he works for.
That's a lie. There's no way.
Then why don't we ask the employees? Let's see who they say the CEO is. I said this and turned my gaze toward Jacob. Realizing there was no way out, he finally spoke up, directing his words at Margaret.
Emma's telling the truth. She is the CEO here.
Margaret, clearly stunned, finally went quiet. Or rather, she was at a complete loss for words.
Is that true?
Now that she had no choice but to accept it, her shock was evident.
Why didn't you ever tell me? You always said Emma is useless and can't do anything.
I only said that to save face.
So Jacob wasn't just a nice husband after all. Behind the scenes, he had been belittling me to maintain his pride. And from the way he said it, this wasn't just a one-time thing. It was something he had been saying regularly. This was the first I had heard of it. Just when I thought my opinion of him couldn't sink any lower, it did. If you're finally ready to accept the truth, let me tell you everything. Let's see who the real useless one is. I then laid out every detail about Jacob's behavior at work. The constant tardiness, the unapproved absences, the frequent mistakes, and how I had been the one cleaning up his messes every time. Without exaggeration, without lies, just the plain truth. Jacob sat there in silence, listening. He didn't argue, because he knew better than anyone that everything I said was true. By the way, I do have a question. When you were skipping work or showing up late, what exactly were you doing? At this point, it didn't matter whether he thought he could get away with it or not. But I was still curious. Not that I didn't already have a good guess. Jacob sighed in resignation, then admitted it.
Gambling.
Just as I thought.
You've got to be kidding me.
Even Margaret seemed too drained to yell anymore. Well, it's a little late for regrets now. Do you know what this is? What I held up was a divorce agreement. I had covered for him countless times out of pity, but even that pity was gone now. It was time to end this. The moment Jacob saw the divorce papers, he took a few steps back and suddenly started apologizing.
I'm sorry. It was all my fault. I'll change, I swear. Please, just.
I let out another sigh. And what exactly are you apologizing for?
For everything.
Do you really think an apology can fix everything? Jacob fell silent. Of course, he had no answer. An apology wasn't going to change anything. At this point, nothing you say will mean anything to me. The only thing you can do now is sign your name on this paper.
Come on, Jacob is trying this hard. Can't you at least give him a chance?
Even after everything she had just heard, Margaret still insisted on defending Jacob. I have no idea how either of them can think this way, and at this point, I have no intention of trying to understand.
Hey, don't just stand there. Say something.
Margaret, be quiet. Before I realized it, my voice had risen. This is final. Nothing you do or say will change that. Even after that, Margaret wouldn't back down.
If you're divorcing him, then pay alimony. You couldn't even give him a son, so it's the least you owe.
Unbelievable. I'm sorry, but this divorce has nothing to do with this company. If you want to discuss it, you can do so through a lawyer. And if you continue causing a scene, I'll have security remove you.
Go ahead and try.
She really was beyond saving. I picked up the phone on my desk and called building security. Within minutes, 2 security guards entered the office and struggled to restrain Margaret as she thrashed and screamed. The entire time, Margaret kept yelling and even lashed out at the security guards, but eventually they forcibly removed her from the office. Jacob quietly followed behind her without resistance. His back looked utterly defeated and pathetic. Sometime later, our divorce was finalized. Margaret continued trying to interfere at every opportunity, but thanks to my lawyer, we handled everything smoothly. As for Margaret's last-minute screaming about alimony before being taken away by security, the court ruled that neither Jacob nor Margaret was entitled to anything due to the emotional distress they had caused Claire and me. Through several discussions with my lawyer, I unexpectedly learned about Jacob's current situation. After the divorce, he resigned from his job, but has been struggling to find another one. Apparently, Margaret told him not to settle for anything beneath my company, which has made his job search nearly impossible. Because of that, he's been mentally worn down. On top of that, since Margaret's savings alone aren't enough to support both of them, they've been living in poverty. I apologized to my remaining employees for having shielded Jacob for so long. I had earned some resentment from a few employees over this, so I expected some backlash. But instead, they all offered me words of comfort.
It wasn't your fault, Emma.
Realizing how fortunate I was to have such good employees only strengthened my motivation to push the company forward. I silently swore to work even harder. After the divorce, I was left living alone in the same house. It had never been a particularly lively home, but still, living alone in a big house felt lonely. But my daily joy wasn't just my work. I also enjoyed visiting Claire, who had moved out after getting married. Fortunately, both she and Ryan always welcomed me warmly, so I took full advantage of that. A few weeks ago, a new life joined their family, and today I used my day off to visit them. She's adorable. I couldn't help but stare in awe. There's a saying that you'd do anything for your grandchild, and now I finally understood what that meant.
You're a full-fledged grandma now.
I can't help it. She's just so cute. Claire didn't have many fond memories of her own grandmother. That made me even more determined to shower my granddaughter with all the love she deserved. By the way, she was a baby girl. Unlike a certain someone, it wasn't something that mattered in the slightest. She was absolutely adorable, and that was all that mattered.
All right, I'm going to get dinner ready. Can you watch her for a bit?
Of course. Honestly, I'd love to just take her home with me.
Yeah, let's not do that.
This must be what true happiness means. Once again, I realized just how precious it really is